The blazing summer sun beat down on Clarissa Keller as she stumbled across the dusty terrain, her arms trembling beneath the weight of her 5-year-old son. The boy's face was flushed with fever, his small body burning against her chest as she approached the ranch she'd fled from 3 years prior, praying the man who owned it would still be there and that he would help them despite everything that had happened between them. It was 1878 in the New Mexico Territory, and Clarissa had nowhere else to turn. The drought had been unforgiving, stretching across the land like God's punishment, drying up hopes along with the crops. Her son Matthew had fallen ill 2 weeks ago, and despite her best efforts with herbal remedies and cool compresses, his condition had worsened until his breathing became labored and his little body shook with violent coughs that tore at her heart. Quinn O'Malley had been breaking a new stallion when he spotted the figure approaching from the eastern edge of his property. The woman's gait was unsteady, and even from a distance, he could tell she was carrying someone. He released the horse into the corral and squinted against the harsh sunlight, his heart nearly stopping when recognition dawned. "Clarissa?" he whispered, disbelieving. He hadn't spoken her name aloud in nearly 3 years, not since the night she disappeared without a word, leaving nothing but a hastily scrawled note and a hole in his chest where his heart used to be. He'd spent months searching for her before accepting she didn't want to be found. Now she was here, materializing like a mirage across his land, and Quinn found himself running toward her before his mind had fully processed what he was seeing. As he drew closer, he could see she was carrying a boy with dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. The child looked deathly ill. "Help him," Clarissa pleaded as Quinn reached them, her voice cracking with exhaustion and fear. "Please, Quinn, he's burning up. I didn't know where else to go." Quinn didn't hesitate. Whatever had happened between them belonged to the past. The child needed help, and that was all that mattered now. He gently took the boy from Clarissa's arms, noting how light he felt, how his breathing rattled in his chest. "How long has he been sick?" Quinn asked, already striding toward the house, careful not to jostle the child. 2 weeks, Clarissa answered, stumbling to keep up. "It started with a cough, then the fever came. I've tried everything." Quinn nodded grimly. "Mrs. Abernathy had something similar last month. Doc Fisher treated her with willow bark tea and some kind of tonic." He pushed open the door to his ranch house with his shoulder. "Let's get him cooled down first." The interior of Quinn's home was sparse but clean. He'd built the place with his own hands after acquiring the land 5 years ago, adding rooms as his cattle business grew. He'd always imagined filling those rooms with a family one day with Clarissa and their children. That dream had died the night she left. Quinn laid the boy on his own bed and began removing the child's sweat-soaked clothes. "Get me some cold water and clean rags from the kitchen," he instructed, his voice calm despite the urgency he felt. The boy's skin was hot to the touch, his breathing shallow. Clarissa hurried to comply, returning moments later with a basin of water and several clean cloths. She hesitated at the bedside, her eyes fixed on her son's flushed face. "He'll be all right," Quinn said, though he wasn't certain of it. "What's his name?" "Matthew," Clarissa replied softly. "His name is Matthew." Quinn nodded, soaking a rag in the cool water and placing it on the boy's forehead. "Hello there, Matthew," he said, his voice gentle. "You're going to be just fine. You're safe now." The boy's eyelids fluttered, but he didn't wake. Quinn continued to bathe his small body with cool water, working methodically to bring down his fever while Clarissa hovered nearby, her face etched with worry. "I need to ride into town for the doctor," Quinn said after a while. "Can you keep doing this while I'm gone?" Clarissa nodded, taking the cloth from him. Their fingers brushed, and Quinn felt a jolt of the old, familiar electricity between them. He pulled away quickly. "There's food in the pantry if you're hungry," he said, rising to his feet. "I'll be back as soon as I can." Quinn rode hard into Cottonwood Springs, pushing his horse to its limits. The town had grown in the years since he'd first settled in the territory, boasting a general store, a saloon, a small church, and, thankfully, a doctor's office. Doctor Fisher was just closing up when Quinn arrived, covered in dust and desperation. It's a child, Quinn explained breathlessly. High fever, labored breathing, been sick for 2 weeks. Dr. Fisher, a balding man in his 50s with kind eyes and steady hands, didn't ask questions. He simply gathered his medical bag and followed Quinn back to his ranch. By the time they returned, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land. Clarissa met them at the door, her face drawn with exhaustion. His fever's gone up, she said, leading them to the bedroom. He started coughing again. Dr. Fisher examined Matthew thoroughly, his expression grave as he listened to the boy's chest with his stethoscope. Pneumonia, he diagnosed, straightening up, and a severe case at that. Clarissa made a small, broken sound, and Quinn instinctively moved closer to her, though he stopped short of touching her. "What can we do?" he asked the doctor. "Keep him cool. Make sure he drinks plenty of fluids, broth, water, willow bark tea for the fever. I'll leave you with some medicine to ease his breathing." Dr. Fisher looked at Clarissa. "I won't lie to you, madam, it's serious, but children can be remarkably resilient." After giving them detailed instructions and leaving several bottles of medicine, Dr. Fisher departed, promising to return in 2 days to check on Matthew's progress. In the quiet that followed, Quinn and Clarissa found themselves alone with the sick child and the weight of their shared past hanging between them. "You should rest," Quinn said, noticing how Clarissa swayed slightly where she stood. "I'll watch over him." "I can't leave him," she protested weakly. "You won't be any good to him if you collapse," Quinn pointed out. "There's a spare room, get some sleep." "I promise I'll wake you if there's any change." Too exhausted to argue, Clarissa reluctantly retreated to the spare bedroom Quinn indicated. She hadn't slept properly in days, constantly vigilant over Matthew's condition. Now, despite her worries, she found herself sinking into a deep, dreamless sleep the moment her head touched the pillow. Quinn settled into a chair beside Matthew's bed, watching the rise and fall of the boy's chest. He was small for his age, Quinn thought, with a mop of dark hair that reminded him of Clarissa's. His features, though, were unfamiliar, not Clarissa's delicate nose or high cheekbones. The boy must take after his father. The thought sent a stab of jealousy through Quinn that he immediately tried to suppress. What right did he have to feel jealous? Clarissa had made her choice when she left. She'd found someone else, started a family. The fact that she was here now, without a husband in sight, raised questions he wasn't ready to ask. Throughout the night, Quinn tended to Matthew, bathing his fevered skin with cool water, spooning broth between his cracked lips when he stirred, and administering the medicine Dr. Fisher had left. By dawn, the boy's fever had dropped slightly, and his breathing seemed less labored. Clarissa appeared in the doorway as the first light of morning filtered through the curtains. She'd washed her face and combed her hair, but exhaustion still shadowed her eyes. "How is he?" she asked, moving to the bedside. "A little better, I think," Quinn replied, rising from his chair. "His fever's down some." Clarissa placed a hand on her son's forehead, relief softening her features. "Thank you," she said, meeting Quinn's gaze for the first time since her arrival. "For taking us in, for helping him," Quinn nodded, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "I've got chores to tend to," he said, heading for the door. "There's coffee in the kitchen, help yourself." He spent the morning in the barn, mucking out stalls and feeding the livestock, trying not to think about the woman and child in his house. It was nearly noon when he finally returned, carrying fresh eggs and milk from the henhouse and dairy cow. Clarissa was sitting beside Matthew's bed, reading aloud from one of the few books. Quinn owned a collection of folk tales he'd bought years ago because he remembered Clarissa mentioning she loved stories. She looked up when he entered, marking her place with a finger. "He woke up earlier," she said, a hopeful note in her voice. "Just for a few minutes, but he took some broth and medicine." Quinn nodded, relieved. "That's good. I brought eggs and milk. Thought I'd make something to eat." "I can cook," Clarissa offered, starting to rise. "Stay with him," Quinn said. "I can manage." In the kitchen, Quinn cracked eggs into a bowl, his mind churning with questions. Where had Clarissa been these past 3 years? What had happened to Matthew's father? Why had she come back now after all this time? He was frying the eggs when Clarissa entered the kitchen, her steps hesitant. "He's sleeping peacefully," she said, hovering near the doorway. I thought I might help. Quinn gestured toward the cupboard. Plates are there. They worked in silence, setting the table and preparing a simple meal. When they sat down to eat, the quiet between them grew heavier, laden with unspoken words. "Where have you been, Clarissa?" Quinn finally asked, unable to contain the question any longer. She pushed her eggs around her plate, not meeting his eyes. "Arizona, mostly. Phoenix for a while, then a small mining town called Copper Springs. And Matthew's father?" The question burned his throat on the way out, Clarissa's hands stilled on her fork. "There was a man," she said carefully. "After I left, he wasn't a good man, Quinn. I made a mistake." Quinn waited, sensing there was more to the story. "He left when I told him I was with child," Clarissa continued, her voice flat. "I haven't seen him since. Matthew has never known his father." Something twisted in Quinn's chest, anger at the nameless man who had abandoned Clarissa, relief that she wasn't tied to him, guilt for feeling relieved. "Why did you leave?" he asked, the question he'd wanted to ask for 3 years. Clarissa finally looked up at him, her eyes filled with regret. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Everything was happening so fast. You wanted to marry, to start a family right away. I wasn't ready. I felt trapped." Quinn remembered his eagerness, his certainty that they should wed immediately after her father died, leaving her alone in the world. He'd been so sure it was the right thing, the only thing. He hadn't noticed her hesitation, her fear. And now, he asked, unsure what he was even asking. "Now I'm here because my son needs help," she said simply. "I have nowhere else to go, Quinn. Once Matthew is better, we'll move on. I promise we won't be a burden to you for long." Before Quinn could respond, a weak call came from the bedroom. "Mama!" Clarissa was on her feet instantly, hurrying to Matthew's side. Quinn followed more slowly, giving them space. The boy was awake, his eyes clearer than they had been the day before. He looked at Quinn with curiosity as he entered the room. "Matthew, this is Mr. O'Malley," Clarissa said. "He's been helping take care of you." Matthew studied Quinn with solemn eyes. "Thank you, sir," he said, his voice small and raspy. Something warmed in Quinn's chest at the boy's politeness. "You can call me Quinn," he said, moving closer to the bed. "How are you feeling, son?" The endearment slipped out naturally, and Quinn saw Clarissa's quick glance but chose to ignore it. "Thirsty," Matthew replied, trying to sit up. Quinn poured water from the pitcher on the bedside table and helped Matthew drink while Clarissa supported his back. The boy managed several sips before lying back, exhausted by the small effort. "Are you a real cowboy?" Matthew asked, eyeing Quinn's dusty clothes and boots. Quinn smiled. "I suppose I am. I've got cattle and horses." Matthew's eyes widened slightly. "I've never seen a real horse up close." "Well, when you're feeling better, I'll introduce you to mine," Quinn promised. "I've got a gentle mare named Daisy who loves children." Matthew smiled faintly before his eyelids drooped, sleep claiming him once more. Quinn and Clarissa retreated to the kitchen, leaving the door ajar so they could hear if he called out. "He seems better," Quinn observed. Clarissa nodded, relief evident in her face. "Thanks to you. If you hadn't taken us in." She trailed off, unwilling to voice the alternative. "Anyone would have done the same," Quinn said, though they both knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would welcome a woman who had broken their heart, especially one returning with another man's child. The next few days fell into a pattern. Quinn would tend to his ranch duties in the morning, checking on Matthew between tasks. Clarissa stayed close to her son, reading to him, bathing him, and encouraging him to eat. Dr. Fisher visited as promised and pronounced Matthew on the mend, though he cautioned that full recovery would take time. By the end of the week, Matthew was strong enough to sit up in bed for longer periods. His appetite had returned and the fever was gone, though a lingering cough remained. Quinn found himself spending more time in the house, drawn by the boy's curious questions about ranch life and his eager enthusiasm whenever Quinn described the animals or the land. "Tell me about the horses again," Matthew requested one evening as Quinn sat beside his bed, whittling a small wooden figure. Quinn smiled, setting aside his knife and the half-formed horse he was creating. "Well, there's Daisy, who I told you about. She's a palomino, that means she's golden like honey with a white mane and tail. Then there's Thunder, my stallion. He's black as midnight and fast as lightning. Matthew's eyes shone with excitement. Can I see them soon? Quinn glanced at Clarissa, who sat in a chair by the window, mending one of Matthew's shirts. If your mother says it's all right, maybe tomorrow we could take you out to the porch. You could see the corral from there. Can we, Mama? Matthew pleaded, turning to Clarissa with hopeful eyes. Clarissa hesitated, her protective instinct warring with her son's obvious improvement. Perhaps, she conceded. If you rest well tonight and eat all your breakfast in the morning. Matthew's face lit up with a smile that transformed him, and Quinn felt something shift inside his chest. In just a week, he'd grown fond of the boy, with his serious questions and bright laugh when Quinn told him stories of ranch mishaps or described the antics of the new foal born in the spring. Later, after Matthew had fallen asleep, Quinn joined Clarissa on the porch. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the awkwardness between them gradually easing as the days passed. He likes you, Clarissa said eventually. He's never had a man in his life, no one to look up to. Quinn nodded, unsure how to respond. He'd been careful not to overstep, aware that Matthew wasn't his child, that Clarissa had made no promises beyond staying until the boy recovered. What will you do, he asked, when he's well enough to travel? Clarissa sighed, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. I don't know, I have a little money saved. Enough to get us to California, maybe. I've heard there are opportunities there for women on their own. The thought of them leaving, of the house returning to its empty silence, filled Quinn with a hollow feeling he couldn't name. You could stay, he said before he could think better of it. Not as before, but there's work here. The ranch is doing well. I could use help with the books, maybe some cooking for the hands during roundup. You'd have a roof over your heads, food on the table. Clarissa looked at him, surprise evident in her expression. Quinn, I can't ask that of you, not after everything. You're not asking, I'm offering. Quinn met her gaze steadily. For the boy's sake, if nothing else, he needs time to recover fully, and he should have a chance to ride that horse I promised him. A small smile touched Clarissa's lips. Just until he's stronger, she agreed after a moment, and I'll earn my keep, I won't be charity. Quinn nodded, satisfaction warming him despite the coolness of the evening. It wasn't much, just a temporary arrangement, but it was something. A chance, perhaps, to heal old wounds or at least to understand them better. True to his word, the next day Quinn helped Matthew onto the porch, where the boy could see the corral and the horses grazing in the pasture beyond. Matthew's face lit up at the sight, his eyes wide with wonder. Can we go closer? He asked eagerly. Quinn glanced at Clarissa, who hovered nearby, concern etched on her face. Not today, he said gently. You're still getting your strength back, but soon, I promise. To distract Matthew from his disappointment, Quinn began pointing out features of the ranch, naming the distant mountains and explaining how cattle drives worked. The boy listened with rapt attention, asking questions that revealed a quick mind and genuine interest. Were you always a cowboy? Matthew asked, leaning against the porch railing. Quinn smiled, settling into a chair beside him. Not always. I grew up in Boston, that's a big city far to the east. My father was a banker, and he expected me to follow in his footsteps. But I read too many dime novels about the West, and when I was 18, I hopped a train and never looked back. Weren't you scared? Matthew's eyes were wide. Terrified, Quinn admitted. But sometimes being afraid is worth it if it means finding where you belong. Clarissa, who had been listening quietly, met Quinn's gaze over Matthew's head. Something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of how different their paths had been. Quinn had run toward his future while Clarissa had fled from hers. As the days passed, Matthew grew stronger. His cough gradually subsided, and color returned to his cheeks. Quinn fashioned a small wooden crutch to help him walk, and soon the boy was exploring the house, examining Quinn's sparse possessions with curiosity. One afternoon, while Clarissa was doing laundry in the yard, Matthew discovered a trunk in Quinn's bedroom that contained mementos from his past, including a small portrait of Clarissa that Quinn had commissioned from a traveling artist during their courtship. Why do you have a picture of my mama? Matthew asked innocently when Quinn found him sitting on the floor beside the open trunk. Quinn hesitated, unsure how to explain. "Your mother and I knew each other a long time ago," he said finally. "Before you were born." Matthew studied the portrait thoughtfully. "Were you friends?" "Yes," Quinn said, the simplification easier than the truth. "Very good friends." "Is that why you're helping us? Because you were friends with Mama?" Quinn knelt beside the boy, carefully returning the portrait to the trunk. "Partly," he admitted, "but also because it's the right thing to do. When someone needs help, you help them if you can. That's what my mother taught me." Matthew nodded solemnly. "My mama says the same thing, but sometimes people don't help even when they could." The boy's words carried a weight that suggested experience beyond his years, and Quinn wondered what hardships he and Clarissa had faced before arriving at his door. "Well, you don't have to worry about that here," Quinn assured him, closing the trunk. "Now, how would you like to meet Daisy today?" "I think you're strong enough for a short visit to the barn." Matthew's face lit up, all questions about the portrait forgotten in the excitement of finally seeing the horses up close. Quinn helped him outside, where they found Clarissa hanging sheets on a line strung between two trees. "Quinn's taking me to see the horses, Mama," Matthew called, his voice stronger than it had been since their arrival. Clarissa looked up, alarm briefly crossing her features before she schooled her expression. "Is that so?" she said, coming over to them. "Are you sure you're up to it?" "I feel good today," Matthew insisted, "and Quinn will be with me." Clarissa looked at Quinn, who nodded reassuringly. "We'll go slow," he promised, "and I'll carry him if he gets tired." With Clarissa's reluctant blessing, Quinn and Matthew made their way to the barn, the boy leaning on his crutch but managing remarkably well. Inside, the sweet smell of hay and the soft nickering of horses greeted them. Matthew paused in the doorway, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of the animals he'd only heard about. "It's all right," Quinn said gently. "They're used to people." He led Matthew to Daisy's stall, where the Palomino mare stretched her neck over the gate, curious about the small visitor. Quinn lifted Matthew up so he could stroke her velvety nose. "She's so soft," Matthew breathed, wonder in his voice. "She likes you," Quinn observed as Daisy nuzzled the boy's hand, searching for treats. "Here." He handed Matthew a small apple from his pocket. "Hold it flat on your palm like this." Matthew giggled as Daisy's lips tickled his hand, taking the apple with delicate precision. "Can I ride her someday?" he asked hopefully. "When you're stronger," Quinn promised. "It won't be long now." They spent nearly an hour in the barn, with Quinn introducing Matthew to each of the horses and explaining their various personalities and quirks. By the time they returned to the house, Matthew was tired but glowing with excitement, eager to tell Clarissa everything he'd learned. That evening, after Matthew had gone to bed, exhausted by his adventure, Clarissa found Quinn on the porch, smoking his pipe and watching the stars emerge. "Thank you," she said, sitting beside him on the bench. "I haven't seen him so happy in a long time." Quinn nodded, tapping his pipe against the railing to knock out the ashes. "He's a good boy, bright too, picks things up quickly." "He's always been curious," Clarissa agreed. "Even as a baby, he wanted to see everything, touch everything." She paused, a shadow crossing her face. "Life hasn't been easy for him. We've moved so often, and there's never been much money for books or toys." Quinn studied her profile in the fading light. The past 3 years had changed her. There was a hardness around her eyes that hadn't been there before, a wariness that came from disappointment and struggle. But she was still beautiful, still the woman who had captured his heart the moment he saw her stepping off the stagecoach in Cottonwood Springs, newly arrived to teach at the town's small school. "What happened, Clarissa?" he asked quietly. "After you left, the real story." Clarissa was silent for so long that Quinn thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, as if she feared the night itself might carry her words to unwanted ears. "I was scared," she began. "Everything was happening so fast. My father died, and suddenly you were talking about marriage and children, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I loved you, Quinn, but I wasn't ready." She twisted her hands in her lap, a nervous gesture he remembered from before. "I went to Phoenix first, found work as a seamstress in a dress shop. It was there I met James Holloway. He was charming, well-dressed, said he was in the mining business. Quinn remained silent, letting her tell the story at her own pace. We started courting. He was different from you, Wilder, more exciting. He promised to show me the world. A bitter smile touched her lips. I was foolish enough to believe him. When I found out I was expecting, he disappeared, left me with nothing but a note saying he was already married to a woman in San Francisco. Quinn's hands tightened on the pipe, anger surging through him at the man who had used and abandoned her. I managed for a while in Phoenix, Clarissa continued. But once Matthew was born, it became harder. The woman who owned the dress shop didn't want a crying baby in the back room. We moved to Copper Springs because I heard they needed a laundress at the mining camp. The work was hard, the pay poor, but we survived. She looked out at the darkened landscape, her expression distant. When Matthew got sick, none of the remedies I tried helped. The camp doctor was a drunk who could barely stand, let alone treat a child. I knew then that I had to swallow my pride and come back, for Matthew's sake. Quinn absorbed her story, picturing Clarissa alone with a newborn, working long hours over steaming washtubs, watching her son grow sicker with no one to turn to. The image made his chest ache. "You did what you had to do," he said finally. "For your boy, there's no shame in that." Clarissa turned to him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I never meant to hurt you, Quinn. Leaving the way I did it was cowardly. I should have talked to you, explained how I felt." "Yes," Quinn agreed, unable to deny the truth of it. "You should have, but that's done now." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the past settling between them, no longer quite as heavy as it had been. "He asked about your picture today," Quinn said eventually. "The one in my trunk." Clarissa looked startled. "What did you tell him?" "That we were friends before he was born." Quinn shrugged. It seemed simpler than the whole truth. Clarissa nodded, relief evident in her expression. "Thank you, he's still young. I'm not sure he'd understand." "He's a smart boy," Quinn observed. "Someday he'll have questions about his father, real questions." "I know," Clarissa sighed. "And I don't know what I'll tell him. The truth seems too harsh for a child." Quinn considered this. "Children understand more than we give them credit for, and they deserve honesty, even if it's difficult." Clarissa studied him in the moonlight. "When did you get so wise about children?" Quinn smiled slightly. "I've had some practice lately." The following week brought a change to the routine that had developed at the ranch. Matthew was now strong enough to spend most of the day out of bed, though he tired easily and still needed frequent rest. Quinn had begun taking him on short walks around the ranch yard, showing him the chicken coop, the vegetable garden, and the spring house where milk and butter were kept cool. Clarissa, meanwhile, had taken over the household duties entirely, cooking meals, cleaning, and even helping with the ranch accounts. She had been a schoolteacher once, and her neat handwriting and quick mind made short work of the ledgers Quinn had been neglecting. It was during one of these accounting sessions that they received visitors. Quinn was in the barn with Matthew, showing him how to brush Daisy's coat, when the sound of approaching horses made him look up. Through the open barn door, he spotted two riders approaching the Peterson brothers from the neighboring ranch. "Stay here with Daisy," Quinn instructed Matthew. "I need to see what these men want." He stepped outside, hand resting casually near the revolver he wore on his hip. The Petersons weren't exactly enemies, but they weren't friends either. They'd had disputes over water rights and straying cattle in the past. "Afternoon, O'Malley," the older Peterson brother Hank called as they drew near. "Heard you had company these days." Quinn's jaw tightened. News traveled fast in ranch country, despite the distances between homesteads. "What can I do for you, Peterson?" "Just being neighborly," Hank replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thought we'd come see for ourselves if the rumors were true." Heard the schoolteacher came back, bringing a bastard with her. Quinn's hand moved to his gun, but before he could respond, Clarissa appeared in the doorway of the house, drawn by the sound of voices. "Gentlemen," she said coolly, coming to stand beside Quinn, "it's been a long time." The younger Peterson brother, Dale, tipped his hat with exaggerated politeness. "Miss Keller, or is it Mrs. something else now?" "It's still Miss Keller," Clarissa replied, her chin lifted in defiance. "That's what we heard," Hank said, his tone insinuating. "Also heard your boy's been sickly." "Shame that," course, without a proper father, a child can't expect much in the way of care. Quinn took a step forward, his expression dangerous. You've said your piece, Peterson. Now get off my land. Hold on now, Dale interjected, raising his hands in a placating gesture. We didn't come to cause trouble. In fact, we're here with an offer. Quinn's eyes narrowed. What kind of offer? Hank smirked. We're expanding our operation, looking to buy up neighboring properties. Thought you might be interested in selling, especially now that you've got complications. My ranch isn't for sale, Quinn said flatly. Might want to reconsider, Dale suggested. A man in your position taking in another man's leavings, well, it could make things difficult around here. Folks talk. Quinn's hand closed around his gun, and he might have drawn it if Clarissa hadn't placed a restraining hand on his arm. Mr. Peterson, she said, her voice steady despite the flush of anger on her cheeks. I suggest you take your business elsewhere. Mr. O'Malley has made his position clear. Hank's expression hardened. Just think about it, O'Malley. Our offer won't stay open forever, and raising another man's bastard is a heavy burden financially and otherwise. Before Quinn could respond, a small voice came from the barn doorway. Quinn, who are these men? Matthew stood there, leaning on his crutch, confusion evident on his face. He must have grown curious when Quinn didn't return. The Peterson brothers exchanged meaningful glances, and Hank's mouth curved in a cruel smile. Well now, this must be the boy himself. Spitting image of his mother, ain't he? Can't see much of a father in him at all. Quinn moved with a speed that surprised even himself, grabbing Hank by the shirt front and yanking him half out of his saddle. You say one more word about that child and they'll find pieces of you scattered across 3 counties, he growled. His voice low and deadly. Dale reached for his gun, but Clarissa was faster, snatching up the rifle Quinn kept by the door and aiming it steadily at the younger Peterson. I wouldn't, she advised calmly. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Hank raised his hands in surrender. Easy now, O'Malley. No need for violence. We're going. Quinn released him, stepping back but remaining alert. Don't come back, he warned. And spread the word. Anyone who speaks ill of Clarissa or her boy will answer to me. The Peterson brothers retreated, throwing dark looks over their shoulders as they rode away. Once they were out of sight, Quinn turned to find Matthew standing beside Clarissa, his small face troubled. What did they mean? He asked. About me not having a proper father. Quinn and Clarissa exchanged glances, the moment they'd discussed on the porch having arrived sooner than expected. Clarissa knelt down to Matthew's level, taking his hands in hers. Let's go inside, she suggested gently. I think it's time we had a talk. Quinn hesitated, unsure if he should be part of this conversation, but Clarissa looked up at him with a silent plea in her eyes. Both of us, she added, and Quinn nodded, following them into the house. They settled in the small sitting room, Matthew between them on the sofa. Clarissa took a deep breath, clearly searching for the right words. Matthew, you know that families come in all different kinds, she began. Some children have both a mother and a father who live together. Some have grandparents who raise them, or aunts and uncles. Matthew nodded solemnly. Like Billy at the mining camp, he lived with his grandma because his parents died. That's right, Clarissa confirmed. In our case, it's been just you and me. Your father, he went away before you were born. Did he die? Matthew asked, his voice small. Clarissa hesitated, then shook her head. No, he didn't die. He chose to leave. He wasn't ready to be a father. Matthew's brow furrowed as he processed this. Didn't he want me? The pain in the boy's voice made Quinn's chest tighten. Without thinking, he placed a gentle hand on Matthew's shoulder. Your father made a mistake, Quinn said firmly. A big one. He missed out on knowing an amazing young man, and that's his loss. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you, son. It means he wasn't good enough to be your father. Clarissa shot Quinn a grateful look before turning back to Matthew. Quinn is right. Some men aren't ready for the responsibility of being a father, but that doesn't change how special you are or how much you're loved. Matthew absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. Those men were mean about it, he observed. They called me a bad word. Some people are unkind about things they don't understand, Clarissa explained, but their words can't hurt you unless you let them. Matthew nodded slowly, then looked up at Quinn. You're not my real father, but you take care of me like a father would, he said with the simple directness of childhood. Is that okay? Quinn felt something catch in his throat. Yes, he managed. That's more than okay, Matthew. The boy seemed satisfied with this answer. After a few more questions, which Clarissa answered with honest simplicity, Matthew announced he was tired and wanted to rest. Quinn helped him to his bedroom, settling him on the bed with a promise to continue their horse-brushing lesson the following day. When Quinn returned to the sitting room, he found Clarissa standing by the window, arms wrapped around herself as if for protection. She turned at his approach, her eyes damp but her expression composed. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for what you said to him about his father." Quinn shrugged uncomfortably. It was the truth. "Still," Clarissa insisted, "you didn't have to step in. This isn't your burden." "Is that what you think?" Quinn asked, moving closer. "That you and Matthew are a burden to me?" Clarissa looked away. "Aren't we? You've taken us in, cared for a sick child, and now you're being threatened by your neighbors because of us. The Petersons won't be the last to talk, Quinn. Your reputation, damn my reputation," Quinn interrupted, surprising them both with his vehemence. "I don't care what the Petersons or anyone else thinks. Matthew is a fine boy who deserves better than the hand he's been dealt, and you," he broke off, struggling to articulate the complex emotions swirling within him. "And me," Clarissa prompted softly. Quinn ran a hand through his hair, searching for words. "You came back," he said finally. "Not for me, I know that, for Matthew, but you're here now and seeing you with him, watching you fight for him, protect him, it's changed how I see things, how I see us." Clarissa's expression softened. "Quinn, let me finish," he requested. "I was angry when you left, hurt. I thought I knew what we both wanted, and I couldn't understand why you'd run away from it. But now I see that I was pushing too hard, trying to make you fit into the future I'd imagined without asking if it was what you wanted." He took a step closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "I'm not asking for anything, Clarissa. I just want you to know that you and Matthew have a place here for as long as you want it. No conditions, no expectations." Clarissa studied his face as if searching for some hidden motive. Finding none, she reached out hesitantly, her fingers brushing his hand. "The girl who left you was afraid," she said. "Afraid of being trapped, of losing herself in someone else's dreams. The woman who came back is different. She's learned what matters." Their fingers intertwined, the touch tentative but full of possibility. Neither moved to deepen the connection, both aware that whatever was growing between them needed time and care, like Matthew's recovery, like the tender shoots in Quinn's garden, like trust rebuilt after betrayal. "One day at a time," Quinn suggested, and Clarissa nodded, a small smile lifting the corners of her mouth. "One day at a time," she agreed. The confrontation with the Peterson brothers marked a turning point. Word spread quickly through the surrounding ranches and into town that Quinn O'Malley had taken a stand for Clarissa Keller and her fatherless child. Reactions were mixed. Some neighbors distanced themselves, while others, like elderly Mrs. Wilkins from the adjacent homestead, made a point of visiting with freshly baked pies and offers of friendship to Clarissa, Dr. Fisher continued to check on Matthew regularly, pleased with the boy's progress. By the end of the month, Matthew was strong enough to sit on Daisy while Quinn led her slowly around the corral, Clarissa watching from the fence with mingled anxiety and pride. "Look, Mama, I'm riding," Matthew called, his face alight with joy as he gripped the saddle horn with both hands. "I see you, sweetheart," Clarissa called back, her knuckles white where she gripped the fence rail. "Be careful," Quinn glanced up at her with a reassuring smile. "He's doing fine." "Natural-born horseman, just like his mother used to be." Clarissa looked startled. "You remember that?" "I remember everything about you," Quinn replied simply, turning his attention back to Matthew and the mare. That evening, after Matthew had gone to bed, exhausted but happy from his first riding lesson, Quinn found Clarissa sitting on the porch steps, gazing at the stars. He sat beside her, offering her a cup of coffee, which she accepted with a grateful smile. "He'll be talking about nothing but horses for weeks now," she predicted, warming her hands on the mug. Quinn chuckled. "Probably, But that's not a bad thing, gives him something to look forward to work toward. He needs that after being sick for so long. Clarissa nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. You're good with him, she observed. Patient, kind, he adores you, you know. Quinn felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer night. He's easy to adore back, he said. Smart as a whip, brave as they come. You've done a fine job raising him, Clarissa. You should be proud. She looked down, but not before Quinn caught the sheen of tears in her eyes. I've tried, she said softly. It hasn't always been easy doing it alone. You're not alone now, Quinn pointed out. Clarissa looked up at him, and something in her expression made his heart beat faster. No, she agreed, I'm not. The moment stretched between them, fraught with unspoken words and possibilities. Then Clarissa set her coffee cup aside and with deliberate care placed her hand over Quinn's where it rested on his knee. I've been thinking about what you said, she began. About staying here, about having a place here. Quinn nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Matthew is thriving, she continued. He's happier than I've seen him in a long time, and she hesitated, a flush creeping up her neck. I find myself looking forward to each day in a way I haven't for years. Quinn turned his hand, capturing her fingers with his own. Are you saying you want to stay, if the offer still stands? Clarissa replied, her voice barely above a whisper. It does, Quinn assured her. For as long as you want, both of you. Something shifted in Clarissa's expression, a decision made. Slowly, giving him every chance to pull away, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in a gentle kiss. It was brief, almost chaste, but it sent a current of electricity through Quinn that left him breathless. When she pulled back, her eyes searched his face, uncertain. In response, Quinn raised a hand to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the delicate line of her jaw. I never stopped loving you, he admitted. Even when I wanted to, even when I thought I hated you for leaving, I tried to forget, but I couldn't. Clarissa leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. I told myself I left because I wasn't ready, she said. But part of me was just scared of how much I loved you, how completely I could lose myself in that feeling. Quinn drew her closer, resting his forehead against hers. We're different people now, he said. We've both changed. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Clarissa nodded, her breath warm against his lips. Maybe it's exactly what we needed. This time when they kissed, it was deeper, a reawakening of something that had lain dormant but never truly died. Quinn's arms encircled her, drawing her against his chest as her hands came up to tangle in his hair. They fit together as if the years apart had been nothing more than a breath, a momentary pause in the story they were meant to write together. When they finally broke apart, both slightly dazed, Clarissa laughed softly. What will people say? She teased, though there was a genuine question beneath the lightness. Quinn shrugged, unconcerned. They'll talk, as people do, and then they'll find something new to talk about. What matters is what happens here between us, Clarissa sobered. Matthew loves you more than anything in the world, Quinn finished for her, and I would never try to replace his father or erase the past, but I'd like to be part of his future if you'll let me, part of both your futures. Clarissa's smile was like the sunrise, gradual but transformative. I think we'd like that very much, she said. The days that followed took on a dreamlike quality for Quinn. Each morning he woke to the sounds of Clarissa preparing breakfast, Matthew's excited chatter filling the kitchen as he helped set the table or fed the chickens under Quinn's supervision. The ranch house, which had seemed so empty for so long, now hummed with life and purpose. Clarissa had begun teaching Matthew his letters and numbers in the afternoons, setting up a small desk in the corner of the sitting room. Quinn often found himself pausing in his work to watch them through the window, the sight of their dark heads bent together over a slate or book filling him with a contentment he'd never expected to feel again. In the evenings, after Matthew was asleep, Quinn and Clarissa would sit on the porch or before the fire, talking late into the night. They spoke of the years they'd been apart, filling in the gaps in each other's stories. Quinn told her about the lonely months after she left, how he'd thrown himself into building the ranch, expanding his herd, anything to keep from thinking about her. Clarissa shared stories of Matthew's babyhood, his first steps, first words, the challenges and joys of motherhood. Gradually, carefully, they began to rebuild what had been broken, laying a new foundation based on honesty and understanding rather than the headlong rush of youthful passion that had characterized their first relationship. It was nearly 2 months after Clarissa and Matthew's arrival when Quinn decided it was time to formalize things. He rode into town one morning, ostensibly to purchase supplies, but his real purpose was to visit the small jewelry shop next to the general store. Mr. Goldstein, the elderly jeweler, greeted him with surprise. "Mr. O'Malley, don't often see you in my shop. What can I help you with today?" Quinn removed his hat, suddenly nervous. "I'm looking for a ring," he said, "an engagement ring." Mr. Goldstein's bushy eyebrows rose, but he made no comment on the town gossip he'd undoubtedly heard. Instead, he pulled out a tray of rings from beneath the counter. "I have several lovely pieces. Did you have something particular in mind?" Quinn studied the offerings, most of which seemed too elaborate, too showy for Clarissa's simple tastes. Then his eye caught a small ring toward the back of the tray, a delicate band of gold supporting a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "That one," he said, pointing. "It reminds me of her." "Simple but beautiful." Mr. Goldstein nodded approvingly as he removed the ring from the tray. "An excellent choice. Pearls symbolize purity and new beginnings." New beginnings. Yes, that was exactly what Quinn was hoping for. He paid for the ring, tucking the small velvet box into his pocket before completing the rest of his errands. On the ride home, Quinn rehearsed what he would say, how he would ask Clarissa to be his wife. Should he wait for a special occasion, create one? Include Matthew somehow? He was so lost in thought that he almost missed the cloud of dust rising from the direction of his ranch. Frowning, Quinn urged his horse to a faster pace, a sense of unease growing as he drew closer to home. As he crested the final rise, his heart nearly stopped. A wagon was pulled up in front of his house, and a man he didn't recognize was standing on the porch, arguing with Clarissa. Even from a distance, Quinn could see the tension in her posture, the way she held Matthew protectively behind her. Quinn spurred his horse into a gallop, covering the remaining distance in moments. As he dismounted, he caught the tail end of the man's words. "My son, and I have rights. You can't keep hiding him from me." Clarissa's reply was firm but trembling with anger. "You gave up any rights when you abandoned us, James. Matthew doesn't know you. He doesn't need you disrupting his life now." Quinn's blood ran cold as he realized who the stranger must be. James Holloway, Matthew's father, the man who had left Clarissa alone and pregnant. "Everything all right here?" Quinn asked, his voice deceptively calm as he mounted the porch steps. Holloway turned, sizing Quinn up with a sneer. He was a handsome man in an obvious way, expensively dressed but with a hardness around his eyes that spoke of selfishness and cruelty. "This doesn't concern you," Holloway said dismissively. "This is between me and my wife." "Wife?" Quinn looked at Clarissa, who shook her head vehemently. "We were never married," she stated clearly. "As you well knew, since you already had a wife in San Francisco." Holloway waved this away as if it were a minor detail. "That's all in the past. I've come to make things right, to take you and the boy back with me." Quinn moved to stand beside Clarissa, placing himself between her and Holloway. "The ladies made her position clear," he said. "I think you should leave." Holloway's expression darkened. "And who exactly are you to interfere? Her protector, her latest conquest?" Before Quinn could respond, Matthew peered around Clarissa's skirts, his small face a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Mama, who is this man?" Holloway's expression changed as he caught sight of the boy, something like genuine emotion flickering across his features. "My God," he breathed. "He looks just like my father." Clarissa pulled Matthew closer to her side. "Matthew, go inside," she instructed firmly. "But Mama, now, please," Clarissa insisted, and Matthew reluctantly obeyed, though he continued to watch through the window once inside. Once the boy was out of earshot, Clarissa turned back to Holloway, her voice low but intense. "Why are you really here, James? It's been over 5 years." "Why now?" Holloway had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I've had some financial setbacks," he admitted. "And then I heard about your situation here, living with a rancher, raising my son." "So this is about money," Clarissa asked incredulously. Holloway shrugged. Partly. But also about what's mine. That boy is a Holloway, and my father, my very wealthy father, has been asking about grandchildren, if I bring him a grandson. You're despicable, Clarissa spat. Matthew isn't a bargaining chip for you to use with your father. He's a child who's never even heard your name. Quinn's hand moved instinctively to the gun at his hip, but Clarissa placed a restraining hand on his arm, just as she had with the Peterson brothers. James, she said, her voice suddenly calm and deliberate, I want you to listen carefully. Matthew doesn't know you, he doesn't need you. We have built a life here, a good life. If you truly care about your son at all, you will leave him in peace. Holloway's jaw tightened, his eyes darting between Clarissa and Quinn, calculating. I could take him legally, he threatened. A father has rights, even in this God-forsaken territory. You could try, Quinn interjected, his voice dangerously soft. But consider this. Everyone in town knows Clarissa as a respected former schoolteacher. They know Matthew as a bright, well-mannered boy who's been raised by his mother alone. And they know me as a man who stands by his family. He took a step closer to Holloway, who instinctively backed up. What they'll learn about you, if you pursue this, is that you abandoned a pregnant woman, that you were already married when you seduced her, and that you only returned when you thought there might be money in it for you. How do you think that will play out in front of a judge or in the court of public opinion? Holloway's confidence visibly wavered. You're bluffing, he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Try me, Quinn challenged, his eyes never leaving Holloway's. Or better yet, think about what's really best for the boy. Is it being torn away from the only home and mother he's ever known, or is it being left in peace to grow up happy and cared for? A tense silence followed, broken only by the distant sound of a meadowlark. Then Holloway's shoulders slumped slightly, defeat written in the lines of his face. This isn't over, he warned, but the threat rang hollow. I'll be in town for a few days. If you change your mind about a settlement, you can find me at the hotel. Without waiting for a response, he turned and stalked back to his wagon, climbing up and snapping the reins to set the horses in motion. Quinn and Clarissa stood watching until the wagon disappeared down the road, dust settling in its wake. Only then did Clarissa let out the breath she'd been holding, her composure crumbling as she began to tremble. Quinn put his arm around her shoulders, drawing her against his side. He's gone, Quinn assured her, and if he comes back, we'll handle it together. Clarissa looked up at him, fear and determination battling in her expression. He won't give up so easily, not if he thinks there's money involved. Then we'll be ready, Quinn promised. I meant what I said, Clarissa. You and Matthew are my family now. I won't let anyone take that away. Inside the house, they found Matthew sitting at his small desk, pretending to work on his letters but clearly anxious. He looked up as they entered, his eyes large and questioning. Mama, was that man my father? He asked directly, surprising both adults with his perception. Clarissa sat down beside him, taking his small hands in hers. Yes, she admitted, seeing no point in lying. That was James Holloway, your father. He heard that you were here and he wanted to see you. Matthew absorbed this, his brow furrowed in thought. Is he going to take me away? No, Quinn said firmly, kneeling on Matthew's other side. No one is taking you anywhere you don't want to go. You belong here with your mother, with us. Matthew studied Quinn's face, then looked at his mother. I don't want to go with him, he said decisively. He seems mean. And he made Mama upset. Relief washed over Clarissa's features. You don't have to go with him, she assured her son. This is our home now, if that's what you want. Matthew nodded solemnly. It is. Then, with the resilience of childhood, he changed the subject. Can we still have my riding lesson today? Quinn smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. Absolutely. Daisy's been looking forward to it all morning. As Matthew ran to get his boots, Clarissa turned to Quinn, her expression troubled. What if he does try to take legal action? He could, you know. The courts often favor fathers, regardless of their character. Quinn took her hands in his expression serious. Clarissa, there's something I've been wanting to ask you, something I was planning for tonight, but given what's happened. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing the small velvet box. I think now might be the right time. Clarissa's eyes widened as Quinn opened the box, revealing the pearl and diamond ring inside. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I've loved you since the moment I first saw you, and not even 3 years apart could change that. I love Matthew too, as if he were my own son. I want us to be a family, officially and in the eyes of the law." Understanding dawned in Clarissa's expression. "If we were married and you adopted Matthew legally, James Holloway would have no claim on him," Quinn confirmed. "But that's not why I'm asking. I'm asking because I want to spend my life with you, both of you. Because these past months have shown me what my life was missing, what I was always meant to have." Tears filled Clarissa's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Quinn O'Malley, I will marry you." Quinn slipped the ring onto her finger, his own eyes suspiciously damp as he leaned forward to seal their engagement with a kiss. It was a promise, a new beginning, a declaration of love and commitment that transcended the mistakes and separations of the past. When Matthew returned, boots in hand, he found his mother and Quinn embracing in the middle of the sitting room, both smiling through tears. "Why are you crying?" he asked, concerned. "Is it because of that man?" Clarissa shook her head, holding out her hand to show Matthew the ring. "No, sweetheart, these are happy tears. Quinn has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes." Matthew's face lit up with excitement. "Really, so we'll stay here forever, and Quinn will be my—" He trailed off, suddenly uncertain. Quinn knelt down to Matthew's level. "I would be honored to be your father, Matthew," he said gently. "Not to replace the one who gave you life, but to be the one who loves you, teaches you, and watches you grow, if that's what you want." Matthew considered this solemnly, then threw his arms around Quinn's neck in an enthusiastic hug. "Can I call you Pa?" he asked, his voice muffled against Quinn's shoulder. Quinn's heart swelled with an emotion too powerful for words. "I'd like that very much, son," he managed, holding the boy close. Over Matthew's head, Quinn's eyes met Clarissa's, and in that moment, they both knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, whether from James Holloway or the Peterson brothers or anyone else, they would face them together, as a family. The wedding took place 2 weeks later, a simple ceremony in the Cottonwood Springs Church with Reverend Thompson officiating. Despite the short notice, nearly everyone in town attended, curiosity about Quinn and Clarissa's reunion overcoming any lingering gossip about Matthew's parentage. Clarissa wore a dress of pale blue silk that Quinn had ordered specially from Denver, with Matthew standing proudly at her side, holding the rings on a small pillow. Dr. Fisher served as Quinn's best man, having become a good friend during Matthew's illness and recovery. Even Mrs. Wilkins made the journey into town for the occasion, bringing with her a magnificent wedding cake decorated with sugar flowers. "Every bride deserves a proper cake," she declared, patting Clarissa's hand affectionately. The only shadow on the day was the knowledge that James Holloway was still in town, watching from a distance as the community gathered to celebrate. Quinn had instructed several of his ranch hands to keep an eye on him, ensuring he didn't disrupt the proceedings. But Holloway made no move to interfere, and as the afternoon wore on, word came that he had checked out of the hotel and boarded the eastbound stage. Whether he had genuinely accepted defeat or was simply retreating to plan another approach remained to be seen. But for now, at least, the threat had receded. The celebration continued into the evening, with music and dancing in the town square. Matthew, who had never seen such festivities, watched wide-eyed as couples twirled to the fiddle music, clapping in delight when Quinn swept Clarissa into a waltz. "May I have this dance, Mrs. O'Malley?" Quinn asked formally, extending his hand to his new wife. Clarissa took it with a radiant smile. "You may indeed, Mr. O'Malley." As they moved across the makeshift dance floor, Quinn held her close, still hardly able to believe that this moment was real, that Clarissa was his wife, that Matthew was his son in all but blood, that the future he'd once thought lost forever was now unfolding before him. "Happy," he murmured in her ear. "More than I ever thought possible," Clarissa replied, her eyes shining with joy and promise. And you? Quinn gazed down at her, at the woman who had left him and returned, bringing with her a child who had captured his heart as surely as she had. I have everything I never knew I needed, he said simply. What more could any man ask for? The answer, of course, was nothing. As the music played and stars appeared in the velvet sky above Cottonwood Springs, Quinn O'Malley held his family close, knowing that whatever the future might hold, they would face it together. The woman who had returned with a sickly child, the boy he now called son, and the cowboy who had found his heart's true home at last. 3 years later, the O'Malley ranch had prospered beyond Quinn's wildest expectations. The drought had broken, bringing lush grass to the pastures and allowing him to expand his herd significantly. The original ranch house had been expanded as well, with a second story added to accommodate their growing family. Clarissa had given birth to a daughter, Rose, just over a year after their wedding, a beautiful, strong-willed child with Quinn's auburn hair and Clarissa's warm brown eyes. Now, at 2 years old, she toddled after her big brother with determined steps, hero worship evident in her gaze. Matthew, now 8, had blossomed under Quinn's guidance. He had proven to have a natural affinity for horses, spending every spare moment in the stables or on horseback. Quinn had gifted him with his own pony on his 7th birthday, a gentle gray mare named Star that Matthew doted on. The adoption had been finalized 6 months after the wedding, with no opposition from James Holloway, who seemed to have vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. The official document declaring Matthew to be Matthew O'Malley hung framed in the boy's bedroom, though he rarely looked at it. As far as he was concerned, Quinn had always been his father in every way that mattered. Clarissa had returned to teaching of a sort. With Cottonwood Springs growing rapidly, several new families had settled in the area, bringing children who needed education. Rather than reopening the town school, which would have taken her away from home for long hours, Clarissa had established a small schoolroom in a converted outbuilding on the ranch property, where she taught the neighboring children 3 days a week. It was a perfect arrangement, allowing her to continue the profession she loved while remaining close to her family. Quinn often found himself pausing in his work to watch through the schoolroom window as Clarissa guided her pupils through their lessons, her face animated with the joy of sharing knowledge. On this particular autumn afternoon, Quinn was repairing a section of fence when he heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Looking up, he spotted Matthew cantering toward him on Star, his posture confident and relaxed in the saddle. "Pa," Matthew called, reining in beside Quinn. "Mama sent me to fetch you. There's a letter from the land office." Quinn wiped his brow, curious. He wasn't expecting any correspondence from the territorial land office. "Did she open it?" Matthew shook his head. "She said it was addressed to both of you, so we should open it together." Quinn gathered his tools, then swung up behind Matthew on Star's back. "Let's not keep her waiting then," he said, reaching around his son to take the reins. They found Clarissa on the porch, Rose playing with wooden blocks at her feet while she rocked gently in the chair Quinn had built for her last Christmas. The letter lay unopened in her lap. "What do you think it could be?" she asked as Quinn dismounted and helped Matthew down after him. Quinn shrugged, settling on the porch step beside her rocker. "Only one way to find out." Clarissa handed him the envelope, and Quinn broke the seal, unfolding the official-looking document inside. As he read, his expression changed from curiosity to disbelief, then to quiet satisfaction. "It's about the Peterson property," he said, looking up at Clarissa. "Apparently they've decided to sell after all. The land office is notifying all adjacent property owners before it goes to public auction." The Peterson brothers had continued to be troublesome neighbors over the years, though their direct harassment had lessened after Quinn and Clarissa's marriage. Their ranch had fallen into disrepair as they focused more on drinking and gambling than on proper management. "Are you thinking of bidding?" Clarissa asked, knowing how Quinn had always coveted the Petersons' water rights and the fertile valley that lay between their properties. Quinn looked thoughtful. "It would nearly double our grazing land," he observed. "And that valley would be perfect for expanding the horse breeding operation." In the past year, Quinn had begun breeding quarter horses, discovering a talent for selecting and pairing bloodlines that produced exceptional working animals. Already, ranchers from as far away as Texas were expressing interest in his stock. "Could we afford it?" Clarissa asked practically. Quinn nodded slowly. "With the profits from last year's cattle drive and the horse sales, yes. It would stretch us thin for a while, but it's a sound investment for the future." He glanced at Matthew, who was listening intently. "For the children's future." Matthew's face lit up. "Does that mean we could get more horses, maybe start training them for racing as well as working?" Quinn laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "One step at a time, partner. First, we need to secure the land." Rose, hearing the excitement in their voices, abandoned her blocks and toddled over to Quinn, raising her arms in a silent demand to be picked up. He obliged, settling her on his knee as they continued to discuss the possibilities the Peterson property presented. "If we do this," Clarissa said thoughtfully, "we'll need help, more hands for the expanded operation." Quinn nodded. "I've been thinking about that. Young Johnson from town is looking for work, and he's good with horses. And there's that family that just arrived from Ohio. The father was asking about ranch work last Sunday after church." As they talked, making plans and dreaming dreams, Quinn was struck by how far they had come from that desperate day when Clarissa had stumbled onto his property, a sickly child in her arms and fear in her eyes. Now they sat as equals, partners in every sense, building a future together on the foundation of trust and love they had painstakingly reconstructed. Later that evening, after the children were in bed, Quinn and Clarissa sat on the porch as they often did, watching the stars emerge in the vast New Mexico sky. Clarissa's head rested against Quinn's shoulder, her hand clasped in his. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if Matthew hadn't gotten sick?" she asked softly. "If I hadn't been forced to come back," Quinn considered the question. "I'd like to think our paths would have crossed eventually," he said. "That some force in the universe would have brought us back together." Clarissa smiled at his romanticism. "The practical school teacher in me doubts that," she teased, "but the woman who loves you wants to believe it's true." Quinn turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Either way, I'm grateful for whatever twist of fate brought you back to me, Clarissa. Even though I wouldn't wish illness on any child, especially not our son, I can't help but be thankful for the journey that led us here." "Our son," Clarissa repeated softly, the simple phrase encapsulating so much of what made their life together precious. "Sometimes I watch you with him, teaching him to ride, showing him how to mend a fence or rope a calf, and I think about all he would have missed if we hadn't found our way back to each other." Quinn nodded, understanding perfectly, "And all I would have missed. The joy of watching him grow, of being called Pa, of seeing him become the man he's going to be someday." "You're a wonderful father, Quinn," Clarissa said, her voice thick with emotion. "To both our children, I couldn't have asked for a better man to raise them with." Quinn leaned forward, pressing his lips to hers in a tender kiss that deepened as she responded, her arms slipping around his neck to draw him closer. Though they had been married for 3 years now, the passion between them had only grown stronger, tempered by the deeper intimacy that comes with building a life together. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Quinn stood and held out his hand to his wife. "Come to bed, Mrs. O'Malley," he said, his voice husky with desire. Clarissa took his hand, rising gracefully from her chair. "With pleasure, Mr. O'Malley," she replied, her eyes promising much more than sleep. As they made their way inside, closing the door on the vast New Mexico night, Quinn reflected on the strange and wondrous path that had led them here to this home. This family, this love that had endured separation, misunderstanding, and returned to emerge stronger than before. They had both changed in the years since their first meeting. Life had shaped them, sometimes harshly, teaching lessons neither had been ready to learn when they were younger. But those changes, those lessons, had made them better partners for each other, better parents for their children. And as Quinn held Clarissa in their bed that night, her body warm and familiar against his, he knew with absolute certainty that this was where they were always meant to be, not despite the hardships and separations they had endured, but because of them. Every step of their journey, however painful at the time, had been necessary to bring them to this place of deep and abiding love. Outside, the moon rose over the ranch that was their home, casting silver light over the land that would be their children's inheritance. And in the bedroom down the hall, Matthew and Rose slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved, protected, and cherished by both their mother and the man who had taken them into his heart and called them his own. It was, Quinn thought as sleep finally claimed him, everything he had ever wanted and more than he had ever dared to dream. A family, a legacy, a love that had found its way home at last.